In news from Northeast Africa, there's no end in sight to the raging conflict that has now passed 100 days. The fighting broke out in April, and as the army and paramilitary group, the Rapid Support Forces, vie for power, several mediation attempts have failed.
Sudan's war has now passed the 100-day milestone, uprooting more than 3 million people, 700,000 of whom have fled to neighbouring countries. People like Zainab Abdallah at this camp in Chad's border town, Adre.
They burned our houses and killed the people. The house is burned, and I don't have a home now, and I have nothing to do. I'm building a home from the tree wood, sugarcane straws and plastic covers. But God is gracious.
At this camp, women describe how they fled Darfur with their children on foot. Behind them, they left burned homes and shattered cities. Many men, they say, have been killed. Neither the regular army nor their paramilitary rivals, the Rapid Support Forces, have been able to claim victory. The increasingly intractable conflict has spread from the capital Khartoum, particularly to Darfur. Witnesses and monitors say there has been a sharp increase in ethnically targeted attacks by Arab militias and the RSF. The RSF has said it is not party to violence against civilians, which it described as tribal. Among those who fled to Chad is Amna Omar. She describes hiding children amid gunfire that lasted from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m.
The old die as well as the young. They all die. Some people fled and some men were killed. And we fled. We left on foot. They did not leave us alone. They attacked us. Some died and some survived.
Both sides in Sudan's conflict have shown an openness towards mediation efforts, led by regional and international actors. They've sent delegations to attempt to restart talks in Jeddah. However, previous such negotiations have failed to result in a sustained ceasefire.
Let's discuss this now with Afro-Expert in democracy, governance and human rights, Tapiwa Chadya. Tapiwa, thank you very much for your time this afternoon. What is it, especially when you hear the voices of ordinary Sudanese who've had to flee their homes, that is so impossible about breaking this impasse?
No, thank you very much for having me. You know, the story for Sudan is not a new phenomenon in the African politics. This has been happening for a very long period of time, and we have seen history repeating itself. We have seen the plight of the people in Africa. We are speaking about things which happened in Eritrea, things which have happened in Ethiopia, things which have happened even in Mozambique as well, here in Southern Africa. But what we have seen is a continuous failure of the African leaders to join hands and combat the issue of violence happening in Africa. One of the 2063 agenda aspirations for the African Union was to have a gun-silent Africa. But to date, 2023, 3 years down the line after 2020, that goal has not been achieved. And we have not seen much happening in terms of attaining one of that goal, which is having a gun-silent Africa. We are speaking about 100 days in the conflict of Sudan, which started on the 15th of April. But we know before that there's been an issue of the former President Omar al-Bashir, who was in the country. There were issues that had to do with human rights, governance, and after that we saw that there was a transitional government. When the transitional government was in place, it was very fragile because there was no support from the rest of the African continent, including the African Union. As a result, we saw 2 army generals coming in, and there was a coup d'etat. From that coup d'etat, which then happened, we have seen them now today, they are fighting for power. One is pulling on the other side, and the other army general is pulling on the other side. And the major issue that they've been fighting against has been the integration of the paramilitary group into the Sudanese army. And their contention has been that they played a major role in the Sudanese politics. So with that issue now at hand, they went on loggerheads and they started fighting To date, we have more than 16 ceasefire agreements. People have traveled to Jeddah. We have seen President of Kenya coming in, getting involved. The President of Egypt also coming in and getting involved. But unfortunately, the ceasefire agreements have not been respected. We still see the continuation of the violence in Sudan.
Is it a reasonable condemnation, Tapiwa, especially when you accuse leaders on the continent from being absent, right? Because you take a look at the intervention that you speak of, not only from Jeddah, Saudi Arabia, the likes of the United States of America. And so how should we understand these interventions?
Well, the interventions that the African Union and together with the regional leaders have been putting on, they have not been putting much effort in this. The publicity towards the issue of Sudan, the African Union has been very silent. They have not taken a stronger stance. We have seen now, as we speak, the European Union on its own is taking this matter into their own hands, and they've said by the end of February they are going to have targeted sanctions to the role players into the issue of Sudan. Whether those targeted sanctions are legal or not, that is a story for another day. But for African leaders, as an example, less than 30 days ago, we saw African leaders traveling to Ukraine and Russia to try and mediate a peace agreement between Ukraine and Russia. But we have not seen such efforts. We have not seen such stance and togetherness when it comes to the issues that are happening in Africa. If we speak about Southern Africa, we have issues that have been happening in Mozambique with the Cabo Delgado. The African Union has been silent. We have seen various leaders take positions on the chairmanship of the African Union, but they've not been able to come up to a solid resolution. So we judge the African leaders by history, and history tells us that they'll speak, they'll exchange and cycle their chairmanship, drink coffee and tea together. But when it comes to resolutions towards attaining peace and stability in Africa, things that has to do with democracy, governance and human rights for the benefit of the African child, the African leaders have always been found wanting. And Sudan stands out as one of the issues that African leaders have failed to come and resolve.
You speak of history. It is oftentimes said that the best predictor of future behavior is past behavior. So let's follow the money. In whose interest is it that Africa keeps burning? You spoke of other countries on the continent, including the heart of Africa being the Democratic Republic of Congo, where in 2023 people are still having to flee where they reside and where they live and where they have all of the resources. How is it that these two factions are able to access guns which are meant to be silenced?
That is an open secret. We know the influence of the West. Yes, us as Africans, we still have the syndrome where we believe in what the former colonial master did. The worst form of colonialism which happened to us as Africans was the colonization of the minds. Now we suffer from Stockholm syndrome where we believe in what the former colonial master says. When we look at ourselves as Africans, if you look at history, the majority of the poor African countries, the countries which are not doing very well, are the ones which keep on fighting. And the bigger question has always been, who is there sponsoring the rebels in Africa? We go into the country of DRC. DRC is rich in terms of minerals. We speak of cobalt, we speak of gold, we speak of diamonds, platinum, each and every single mineral that you can talk of, it is found in the country of DRC. But it is in the best interest of the former colonial master to keep DRC burning, because that gives them time and opportunity to come in and loot mineral resources. We know this as Africans. Even the African leaders, they know the people who are sponsoring these paramilitary groups, these insurgents, the attacks, the continuous attacks in gold-rich countries, in oil-rich countries. We know that it is a former colonial master who is coming in to siphon out our mineral resources in Africa. But unfortunately, the leaders that we have in Africa are not completely sold out to have a better Africa, are not completely sold out to attain the core principles and the values that led to the formation of the OAU, the Organization of African Union, in 1963, which led to the formation of the African Union in 2000, after the birth of the last African child, last born, which is South Africa. So the leaders came and tabled down a clear mandate that for Africa to be able to sit on the same table with other continental role players, we need to join hands as Africans. And once we join hands and close ourselves outside of the former colonial master, we will be able to keep our resources for ourselves, keep the gold for ourselves, and have a better Africa. But unfortunately,
we are out of time, but I have to squeeze this in because recently someone noted that as Africans we're so obsessed about rewriting history or changing what happened in the past, but they're now looking at the future and writing a new history, if you will, or writing a new chapter for the continent. What does that look like for you?
As long as the Africans and as long as the lions don't have their own historians, the story of the hunter will always the story of the lion will always glorify the hunter. As long as Africans are not completely sold out to have an emancipation and a better Africa for themselves, the African story will be always told from the perspective of the former colonial master. We need to join hands and make sure that we have leaders who are accountable and who want the better Africa for all.
Tapiwa, thank you very much for your time this afternoon. Afro-Expert in Democracy, Governance and Human Rights, Tapiwa, Chadya.